Hi everyone, my name is JP Atala and I'm going to walk you through the conceptual part of SnagPad.com, and I've entitled this presentation "If Looking for Work as a Full-Time Job, Where Do I Punch In?" Now, the key to any successful job search campaign is the notion of social capital development and strategic job search management, and I'll walk you through that as we go through the presentation. What I'd first like to talk to you about is the notion of how we can decrease the time it takes to find a job. And essentially, what I'm suggesting is that you basically get your clients to stop applying. And what I mean by stop applying is essentially delaying the application process. And within the system, what you're going to find is that if they delay the application process, they're going to have an opportunity to do a couple things. One thing is to be able to go out and find some job postings, and that's really key. Find some opportunities that are linked to their overall objective of their job search, what type of job they're looking for, and so forth. And what we call that within the system is being able to snag job opportunities. The second thing is once they snag these job opportunities, they can bring them back to the system, and SnagPad actually walks them through a set of strategies that ultimately increases the odds of getting their job. So it is a little more work, but we really want to delay that application process so they can kind of work through these strategies to increase their odds of getting a job. The third thing is to then actually apply for those opportunities, and you could do that right from SnagPad. You can actually go to an employer URL, submit an application, or email it right to the employer directly if they have the email address. And then finally, once they've applied, they can manage all of their opportunities, and we know there's going to be multiple opportunities that they go through. So this is really the process, and this is really what SnagPad is really all about, is to get job seekers to think strategically about that, about their job search. Now, social capital, I mentioned the notion of social capital development, is essentially the relationships we have and the embedded social resources that exist within them. And obviously, what's important with a network is to obviously have trust, but to have some sort of sense of reciprocity. So what I give ultimately gives back. I'm willing to give back as well. Accessing contacts and leveraging, and we're going to go in a little more detail in a little bit. The second component is strategic job search management. So knowing job A, B, looking at the job search numbers and being comfortable with that, knowing where job leads come from, and understanding the hiring cycle, and finally monitoring the job search. So being able to see at what particular stage in the job search an individual is at, both obviously for the job seeker, but the coach who's actually monitoring that. So we'll go into more detail in just a bit as well on that. And then finally, I think the reality is sometimes we like to be told what to do. And what I mean by that is structure gives us a sense of comfort, and when we have comfort, we're more likely to remain motivated throughout the process. So that old saying, if looking for work is a full-time job, is actually inaccurate, because it's not a full-time job. It's completely opposite of a full-time job, because looking for work doesn't have that structure. Nobody's telling you, the job seeker, what to do, when to wake up, and so forth. So it's actually more like self-employment. And if we keep this in mind, we'll start to think about structure and how important that is for sustained motivation. And that's what really SnagPad is it's about giving sustained motivation and maintaining a level of activity that's in keeping with a successful job search. So drilling down more into detail, let's just talk about social capital. And essentially, if we look at it, it's about turning our social capital into social income. And how we turn our social capital into social income is three ways, and it's through KAU method. First of all, K is about knowledge of self. So how does that individual feel about accessing social resources, about networking, and so forth? And it's really important that they really have a sense of that. So kind of exploring that is important. It also is extremely important to be clear on what types of goals that individual is trying to accomplish. Now, when we look at the job search, typically what a job seeker will do is set this overall big arching goal of finding a job. And this is problematic in the sense that it's not a short-term goal. It's going to take some time to get that. So it becomes much more difficult to sustain that motivation throughout the process. So if we break it down into bite-sized pieces, it's much more realistic. And as they accomplish these bite-sized goals, they become motivated to go on to the next goal and motivated to go on the next goal and so forth. Before they know it, they found employment. So really, from a job coach perspective, it's really important to break it down into smaller size, bite-sized goals so you can sustain some motivation where, because you're getting them sort of short-term results. And we all like results and success and so forth, and that'll help us out. And SnagPad will be really good at setting those short, small tasks. And if they do these tasks, they're more likely to be successful because they mount, or they create a flow and a sense of heading in the right direction, which can increase the jobs of success. And the last part of the knowledge, or the K, is the knowledge of network. Who is in that individual's network, and how can they access that individual to potentially help them find a job? And it may not be a first degree contact, it may be a second degree. So just again, being aware and conscious of these types of things so that your clients can actually access the hidden job market we tell them to access. And it's about understanding the network, and it's really important to go through that process. The A stands for access, access and context. So now you've identified an individual that could potentially help you, whether it's a first degree or a second degree. What's the connection strategy? What's the best approach and method to get to that particular individual? And so, for example, if you're looking for some information about an industry, if it's a first degree contact, that connection is pretty straightforward. But if it's a friend of a friend, or a second degree contact, what's the strategy for getting them to that individual? Are they going to use the first degree as a referral? Are they going to contact them directly, or however they're going to do that? But it's really important to kind of have a connection strategy prior to actually going out and reaching out to that contact. And it's the same thing as the apply now. It's about stepping back and kind of thinking, what's the best way to connect with somebody so that I can leverage that opportunity and turn that social capital into social income. And then finally, utilization is, how do I get clients or contacts to actually provide some assistance? How do I get to leverage their expertise, leverage their knowledge, and so forth? And it's about going through it in a strategic way and demonstrating that, as much as you're wanting to take from that individual, you're also willing to give back. So how do I increase the odds of that actual person helping me? And thinking about that from a reciprocity perspective, from a trust perspective, and so forth, and making sure that that individual is willing to help, and that you're also willing to help back sometime in the future if they require. And if you go through this KAU, it can ultimately end up in social income, and that's ultimately what we want. And it's okay, again, as long as or the individual is willing to give back. It's okay to take, and so forth. So in essence, social capital is like a savings account. If you continue to take money out but you don't put money back in, eventually it gets to zero and there's nothing left. Same thing with networking. It's important that your clients realize this fact. Moving on to strategic job search management. There's five key points to that I talked about earlier, and would like to go into a little more detail. The first one is knowing job A and B. And essentially, job A is the ideal job that the individual is looking for. So they feel they have the qualifications, they have the desire, etc., to work in that particular position. Job Bs are all the other jobs that make them more competitive for job A. And what we're finding in our research is that an individual makes an occupational choice, and they go after that particular position. But over time, when they're not getting feedback from the labor market, they tend to choose a different type of job, or a different level of job, etc., etc. So it's really important as not to waste time and decrease the time it takes to find employment, to conduct a parallel job search. And what I mean by that is essentially, looking for a job A and not stop looking for a job A, but also consider job Bs as well. So for example, if I'm looking for a professor position as a job A, I may be looking for an employment counselor as a job B, because, job B could make me more competitive for becoming a professor, because, I had the opportunity to develop some curriculums, to do some facilitation, etc. So it's essentially, creating criteria for why you would take a job B. So again, as they go through the process of looking for work and they come across a job B, they can go through a set of criteria and determine whether or not that particular job B opportunity makes sense to them long term. What we're finding is that retention is increasing because they now see a value in taking a job other than the one that they really want. The second component is job search numbers, and essentially what we're looking for is the opportunities, applieds, and the interviews. So for example, what you see on the screen there is 30, 12, and 1. That means that particular individual has identified 30 opportunities, applied to 12, and got one interview. So essentially, we're not looking at numbers, we're looking at ratios. And ratios are really interesting because it could tell us not only what we're doing in the job search or what your job seekers are doing, but it could tell us, forecasted activity that's required to produce a certain output. So, for example, if this was over a week's period or a 2-week period, we'd know this individual, in order to get one interview, at least has to identify 30 opportunities and apply to 12 of them. So it's really about breaking those down and understanding what's going on, and essentially you could really have a conversation with that job seeker. So for example, if I were to ask questions to this job seeker based on the 30, 12, and 1, I would say, okay, let's talk about the 30. What sort of opportunities were you looking at? Are they mostly job A's? Are they mostly job B's? Where did you find the leads? Are they online? Are they from friends, family, etc.? So it really starts a conversation in that. Then I could say, okay, now you've identified 30 opportunities, but you only applied to 12. Why weren't you able to apply to the rest of them? And again, that gives an idea of what's going on. Same thing with the applieds to the interviews. You were able to get one interview. Is that good? Well, in the hospitality trade, that may not be good, but in other industries, it may be good. But just again, having that discussion. So how can we increase the number of interviews? Maybe we need to look at your resume or cover letter. Maybe we need to look at your contacts to see whether or not you could bridge an opportunity with a contact so that you get put to the top of the pile, etc., etc. So again, just these numbers alone can give you a lot of information about what's going on in the job search for a particular individual. The third component is knowing where the job leads come from. And simply this is just being aware of where those sources are coming from. So is the individual looking on job boards, or are they actually tapping into the hidden job market and accessing contacts for job-related information? And again, it may be first degree, second degree, third degree contacts, but just where are the leads coming from, and does the job seeker have a variety of sources that they go to in order to conduct a job search. We know that if they just go to job boards, online job boards, it's extremely problematic because of the competitive nature of those and the access that others have to them. So we want to have a spread out kind of source of job leads for every job seeker to again increase the likelihood of getting a job. The fourth component to the strategic job search management is the notion of the hiring cycle, and realizing that companies get to a point where they realize they need an individual to the point where they need to fill that individual, and there's a time frame. And we've identified across certain areas or certain industries that the typical hiring cycle for an entry-level position is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. So that means if a job seeker submits a resume today for an entry-level position, 8 weeks down the road, if the moon is shining bright and the stars are aligned, they may start working. So there's a delayed reward to the job search, which makes it really complicated. But it's important to know that. On the other hand, if today they don't submit a resume or fill out an application, 6 to 8 weeks down the road, they won't be working. So there's a delayed consequence to job searching. So it's really important that our clients are aware of this so that they can remain realistic in the process, that if they don't do something every day, it doesn't impact them that day, it impacts them sometime down the road. And hiring cycles are different based on industry, based on job type, etc., etc. And then finally, the monitoring the job search is what's critical. So what does it look like throughout the process? And what we've identified is that there's stages to that. From the beginning, it's identifying opportunity, and that's really zero. That's ground zero. So the first thing you got to do is identify job leads. The last thing at 100% is that they've started working. So from 0 to 1. Now, with the typical hiring cycle, we know that 0 to 100% is about 6 to 8 weeks for an entry-level position. So the best opportunity for employment is moving from step to step within that hiring cycle time frame. The A stands for applied, so after they identify an opportunity, they apply to that job. and they've, obviously followed through some strategies and hopefully increased their odds of getting an interview. At 25%, it's essentially they get a call for the interview, so it's a set interview. It's a date set, not yet met, so they have time to prepare and research and do what they need to do in order to, again, to go through a good interview. At 50%, they've actually gone on the interview, so they got a 50% chance of getting the job and 50% chance of not getting the job. And there's things that they can do to obviously generate the next step. And then 90% is essentially the verbal job offer. So because they've been conducting a job search, they have to make the decision as to whether or not this opportunity makes sense to them and fits into their long-term job search plan, whether it's a job A or a job B. So you can see that we've broken down the job search process into stages, and there's essentially 6 stages from 0 to 100%. Now what I'd like to just talk about is SnagPad itself. So we know that the URL is snagpad.com. If you have an agency account, you're going to have a unique agency name after that, so it would be snagpad.com/agency name or whatever that name is. And what I'd like you to walk you through it is from a job seeker's perspective first. So within the system, the job focuses on job search clarity, intensity, and strategy. So the clarity refers to the job A, job B. The intensity is about how, are there activities that they're doing every day happening and occurring, and then strategies, kind of sitting back and strategizing as they move through those different columns. So for example, from identifying opportunity and applying, there's a set of strategies built within the system that walks the user through in order to increase the odds of actually finding the job. So it's really focusing on these 3 areas. Job search clarity, again, is about the job A, job B. So every time a job seeker applies for a job, they're asked, is it a job A or is it a job B? If it's a job B, it'll bring up the skills that are required for the job A so that they can determine whether that job B opportunity will help them build upon those. It'll also ask for the user to think about whether or not this job B meets certain criteria that they established in the profile. So again, for every job opportunity, they go through this process, which is essentially being able to, or learning through this process of becoming a better job seeker. Job search intensity. Within the system, there are challenges. So at the beginning of each week, a job seeker is assigned a set of points, and in order to accomplish those points, required to get a certain amount of points, and in order to acquire those points, they have to complete challenges, and challenges are worth varying points, and once they've completed all the challenge, they can hopefully for that week collect their points. And some of the challenges can range from setting up a LinkedIn account if they don't have one, to identifying somebody in your network who you haven't spoke to in a while and giving them a call and interviewing about where they're working and their experiences and so forth. Excuse me. So it's really allowing the user to complete these small tasks that, if you put them all together, will get them more closer to getting a job. And then finally, the job search strategy is going through these individual strategies at each column in the job search process to increase their odds of moving to the next. And they're built into the system. There's a monitor and a meter at the top of the screen where it shows what percentage of strategies they've completed overall, and this is just an indicator for them as well as you to see how they're doing. Some of the other features is the job search numbers we talked about. It automatically, or SnagPad automatically calculates those numbers and keeps track of them. So those 3 numbers, 30, 12, and 1. It also keeps track of the hidden job market indicator, which essentially tells where are the source of leads coming from. Are they coming from, online? Are they coming from family and friends and so forth? And then finally, it looks at 2 other elements, which is understanding the hiring cycle. So it actually keeps track of the hiring cycle, and if cards aren't moving from step to step within those columns, the system automatically recognizes that and sends out an alert saying, hey, you need to move these opportunities forward if you're going to go from, if you're going to work within that hiring cycle established by the employer. And then finally, it's monitoring the job search process. So it has those particular columns there that they can see visually where their opportunities are. So for example, if all the job cards are in the applied column and only made that, they can clearly see that they haven't been getting called interviews. So it's a quick indication as to how they're doing in that particular, for those particular opportunities. Now, from the SnagPad from a job coach perspective is essentially the ability of the coach to peer in on what the client is doing in the job search, because understanding what they do is a good thing because you may be able to help them do it better. So the key component to that is the dashboard, and on the dashboard is the clients that you have. And all the information surrounding that. So how many job A's they identified, how many job B's, how many weeks they've been in the system. You can leave notes, you can email the client, etc., etc. And you can also drill down and take a look at what we call their pad. And the pad of the client is all of the job opportunities that they have in the system. So this is a way of keeping track of that and actually going in there and looking at patterns, looking at themes that the job seeker is going through, and then leave actual notes on the job cards so that you can comment on particular opportunities. For example, they may have a job card that's not in line with their job A or their job B. So coach may want to leave a comment like, hey, I see this one is not related to job A or job B. Have things changed? Give me a call to let me know. So again, it really gives them a tangible look at what's going on in the job seeker's search itself. And again, you'll be able to go in as a coach and look at not only the specifics of the job opportunity, but what strategies the user or job seeker is actually doing and what they've said and so forth. So you'll be essentially be able to kind of review that, which you otherwise wouldn't, if you were using a manual process. It also shows what challenges were completed by the individual, where they were successful, they weren't so successful. So you can provide some support and whatnot throughout that process as well. It also shows reports, so it gives statistics on the number of job A's, the number of job B's, how long each card has been in a column on average, which is obviously important if it is a date-driven process and there are hiring cycles. If they're too long, obviously that's problematic. How can you look at kind of decreasing the time that those are in the columns, as well as in the movement of the card overall throughout the whole board and the number of cards that you have in the system, as well as the job search numbers. Additionally, from a communication perspective, there is some emails that you can easily communicate within the system to your clients, whether it be one or all clients. You can leave notes that can keep track, and then you can export those notes. Also view notes, leave notes or comments on specific job cards, as well as a chat function. So if anybody happens to be online at that particular time, you can leave some information or give them information, whatnot. So in terms of this quick overview, I've left my information here for you to take a look at. Again, if this is obviously a quick overview of what's going on, but if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me at all. Thank you, and happy helping your client.